Someone at the table laughs a little too loud, and your eyes snap to the person sitting across from them. Not to the one laughing, to the one who went quiet. You scan their face for a micro-expression, a tightened jaw, a forced smile, a gaze that drops half a second too early. And before you've even touched your own food, before you've even noticed whether you're hungry, you're already running calculations. Should you change the subject? Should you include them? Should you say something light to smooth out whatever tension only you seem to feel? No one asked you to do this. No one ever has to. Most people would call this being thoughtful, being generous, being a good person. But what if putting other people first isn't actually about kindness? What if it's about survival? What if your brain learned, a long time ago, that the safest thing you could do was make sure everyone around you was okay? Because when they weren't okay, something bad happened to you. This isn't people-pleasing. This is your nervous system running a threat detection program that never got switched off. If that hits close, stay here. Because today, we're going to walk through 7 hidden psychological patterns behind why you always put others first. Patterns most people mistake for personality when they're actually wired responses. And the last one is going to rewrite the way you see every relationship you've ever had. Number 1. You scan the room before you scan yourself. You walk into a party, and the first thing you register isn't the music, the decorations, or even where the drinks are. It's the emotional temperature. Who looks uncomfortable? Who's standing alone? Who's smiling, but not with their eyes? You do this in meetings, in family dinners, in a car ride with someone you just met. You read the room the way a lifeguard reads the water, constantly, automatically, without thinking. Here's what's actually happening. Your brain is running a process that neuroscientist Stephen Porges calls neuroception, an unconscious evaluation of safety that happens below awareness. Your autonomic nervous system is scanning the environment for threat cues before your conscious mind even catches up. Not because you're anxious in some clinical sense, but because at some point, probably early in your life, other people's emotional states became your early warning system. A parent's silence meant danger. A friend's shift in tone meant rejection was coming. So your brain adapted. It started monitoring everyone else's emotional weather like a radar dish that never stopped spinning. Not because you chose to be hyper-aware, because your nervous system decided that their mood was your safety data. Number 2. You say, "I'm fine," before you actually check. Someone asks how you're doing, and the answer is already out of your mouth before the question finishes. "I'm fine. I'm good. No worries." It's not that you're lying. It's that you genuinely don't know. You're so practiced at tracking other people's internal states that you've lost fluency with your own. Psychologists describe this as a deficit in interoception, the ability to accurately perceive signals coming from inside your own body. Hunger, fatigue, emotional pain, even physical discomfort, these signals are still firing, but they've been turned down to a whisper. Not because you're numb, because your attention bandwidth got hijacked. When a child grows up in an environment where someone else's needs are always louder, always more urgent, always more consequential, the brain learns to deprioritize its own internal signals. It's a resource allocation decision. Your brain only has so much processing power, and it chose to spend it on the thing that kept you safe, reading everyone else. The tragic part? You might feel hunger as irritation, exhaustion as guilt, sadness as a vague sense that you're not doing enough. You're not disconnected from your feelings, you just forgot the language. Number 3, other people's pain physically lands in your body. Your friend tells you about a fight with their partner and you feel your own stomach tighten. A coworker gets criticized in front of the team and heat rises in your chest like it happened to you. You watch someone get embarrassed and your face flushes. This goes deeper than empathy. Your brain's mirror neuron system, the neural network that fires both when you perform an action and when you watch someone else perform it, is operating in overdrive. Researchers have found that this system doesn't just mirror movements, it mirrors emotions. When you see someone in distress, the same pain circuits light up in your own brain. For most people, there's a filter. A cognitive boundary that says, that's their feeling, not mine. Yours is thinner. Not because something is wrong with you, but because you were trained to feel what others feel as a way of predicting what they'd do next. It was useful once. Now it means you carry the emotional weight of every room you walk into, and you don't even realize half of it isn't yours. Number 4. You rehearse conversations to prevent someone else's discomfort. Before you send a text, you reread it 4 times, not for grammar, for emotional impact. You rewrite an email to a friend 3 times because the second version might sound too cold. You plan how you'll bring up a small request, like asking a roommate to do the dishes, the way a diplomat plans a treaty negotiation. And if the conversation doesn't go the way you rehearsed, your heart rate spikes, your palms sweat, your brain treats it like a threat. Because it is a threat to your amygdala. The amygdala is the brain's alarm system. And in people who grew up in emotionally unpredictable environments, it gets calibrated to detect interpersonal conflict as danger. Not metaphorical danger, physiological danger. Your cortisol rises. Your prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for rational thought, goes partially offline. So you rehearse, you predict, you try to control every variable. Not because you're controlling, but because your nervous system learned that other people's discomfort was the prelude to your pain. Number 5. You feel invisible, but you also feel terrified of being seen. Here's the paradox no one talks about. You crave recognition. You want someone to notice how much you carry, how much you give, how much you hold together for everyone else. But the moment someone actually turns the spotlight on you, asks what you need, puts you first, gives you sustained attention, something in you recoils. You deflect. You joke. You redirect the focus back to them. It feels uncomfortable in a way you can't quite name. This is the architecture of a self-concept built entirely on relational utility. When your identity is constructed around being the one who gives, being the one who holds space, being the one who fixes, then receiving threatens the foundation. If someone takes care of you, who are you? If you're not the strong one, what's your role? This isn't low self-esteem in the way most people mean it. It's an identity structure that only has one load-bearing wall, and that wall is other people needing you. The default mode network, the brain regions active when you're thinking about yourself, has been wired to define self through the lens of what you provide, not what you are. So being seen without a function to perform doesn't feel like intimacy. It feels like free fall. Number 6. You keep attracting people who take more than they give. You've noticed the pattern. You pour yourself into a friendship and 3 years later realize you know everything about their life and they've never asked about yours. You date someone who leans on you emotionally, and when you finally crack, they call you too much. You help a colleague through every crisis, and when you need a day off, they act inconvenienced. And you wonder, why do I keep choosing this? But the question isn't really about choosing. It's about what feels familiar. Psychologists who study attachment patterns have found that people who grew up as emotional caretakers develop what's sometimes called a fawn response, a survival strategy where you appease, accommodate, and prioritize others to neutralize perceived threats. This response doesn't just show up in dangerous situations. It shows up in dating, in friendships, in work dynamics. It makes you fluent in one-directional emotional labor. You know how to give because giving was the only safe channel. But receiving? That was never part of the training. So you unconsciously select people who confirm the pattern. Not because you want to be drained, but because a relationship where you give and they take feels structurally familiar. It feels like how relationships are supposed to work. And that belief was installed before you had the language to question it. Now step back and look at what we've just laid out. You scan rooms for emotional data before registering your own needs. You've lost the vocabulary for your own internal states. You absorb other people's pain like it's your own. You engineer conversations to prevent anyone else's discomfort. You've built an identity that depends on being needed. And you keep landing in relationships that confirm the whole cycle. These aren't separate problems. They're one system. And it all points to the seventh pattern, the one underneath everything else. Number 7. You don't actually believe your needs are real. Not that you think you don't have needs. Intellectually, you know you do. But somewhere deep in your operating system, there's a line of code that says your needs are negotiable and theirs are not. When you're hungry, but someone else wants to pick the restaurant, your hunger becomes flexible. When you're tired, but someone needs to talk, your exhaustion becomes optional. When you're hurt by something someone said, your pain becomes an overreaction. You minimize yourself so automatically that you don't even register it as minimizing. It just feels like being reasonable. This is the deepest layer. Cognitive behavioral researchers call these core beliefs the fundamental assumptions about yourself and the world that were formed so early they feel like facts, not thoughts. And the core belief running your system is this: other people's needs are inherently more valid than mine. Not because you decided this, not because you weighed the evidence, because you absorbed it through thousands of micro moments in childhood where your needs were met with inconvenience, irritation, dismissal, or silence. No one had to say your needs don't matter. They just had to consistently act like it. And your brain, doing what brains do, wrote that into the architecture. So now, every time you put someone else first, you're not being generous. You're obeying an instruction you never consented to. But here's where the story shifts. Because if this is learned, truly neurologically learned, then it can be relearned. The same brain that learned to erase your needs to keep you safe is the same brain that can learn, slowly, that your needs are safe to have. That the world won't collapse if you say no. That people who actually love you won't leave because you needed something. That being a good person and having boundaries aren't opposites. They're the same thing, seen from different angles. You were never too much. You were just calibrated in a room full of smoke. Every alarm, every scan, every rehearsed conversation, that was your smoke detector doing exactly what it was built to do. But you're not in that room anymore. And the bravest thing you can do now isn't to keep putting everyone else first. It's to walk back to that table, the one from the beginning where someone laughed too loud and someone else went quiet. And instead of scanning their faces, just once, ask yourself a question you almost never ask. How do I feel right now? Not how does everyone else feel? How do I feel? That question might be the hardest thing you've ever sat with, but it's also the beginning of everything. If this made you feel something you didn't expect, subscribe, because this channel is the place where psychology actually explains you to yourself. And tell me in the comments, did you learn to put others first because someone taught you your needs didn't matter? Or because you watched someone else's needs get ignored and you swore you'd never let that happen? I'll see you in the next video.